And in this section, we're going to be sharing more information about applying for funding for homeless programming. Let's see, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Vasquez. I'm the program manager for the Homeless Services Unit and Housing and Community Services Division. Looking at the attendee list, and it looks like many of the folks that we currently work with currently have joined today's webinar. So thanks so much for being here. This RFP cycle, the city is aligning all of our funding towards the Berkeley's homeless services goals to end homelessness in Alameda County. Many of you will recognize these 4 service goals from the county's Home Together plan. The city is looking for program proposals that keep households at imminent risk of homelessness housed by providing housing retention grants. It's looking for proposals that will connect people to shelter and other resources, including lowering programmatic barriers to crisis services, including access to shelter and transitional housing resources. It's looking for proposals that increase housing solutions. So that would be programs that provide rental assistance, using flexible subsidies or rapid rehousing. And it's also looking for proposals that strengthen coordination, communication, and capacity. So we're really looking for proposals where agencies are willing to work with the city and across agencies to link and support participants with needed services, and using data to track program performance and initiate program refinement to meet outcomes. Next slide. The city is asking for proposals in 14 different categories. The list and definitions for each of these areas is included on the city's community agency RFP page under the additional files tab. You'll also find this document, which is called Key Terms and Definitions, under the list in section B2, which is the section of the application where you'll be asked to select the type of service that you're interested in providing. You'll see it's one of the terms that's highlighted in green. And so if you click on that, you'll see the list of eligible program categories along with a brief description of what each program should include. Before you select a category, we strongly recommend that you review the Homeless Supplemental Questionnaire document that is linked in the Additional Files tab. The document lists the overarching core requirements for all programs. It also lists the core requirements for each service category, and it includes supplemental questions that you'll need to answer. Later on in the presentation, Mayette and Brittany will show you how you can add categories to a primary program as well. While we're here, I wanted to just highlight a few of the service categories that are included in this year's RFP. As was mentioned in the main webinar, the basic needs service category can include any one of these activities. So if you want to apply for a drop-in center, you certainly can do that under the basic needs category. Whether or not your program includes showers, laundries, or lockers, it just should include one of those service types. The coordinated entry system, you will see that's our HRC, so the Housing Resource Centers in Berkeley. That service category includes housing problem solving and street outreach. It would also include the provision of flex funds to help remove barriers to move people quickly into permanent housing. And it also requires that the agency provides crisis and housing assistance and assessments. Applicants under this category will need to show how they provide services both at a physical location as well as in the field. And the street outreach component should include ways of that they're going to enroll people in mainstream resources or have a plan to connect people to mainstream resources. Category number 5, you'll see, has both emergency shelter and navigation center as part of that category. In CDS, you will see that these two activities are separated. So you can either apply for an emergency shelter program or you can apply for a navigation center. The navigation center is different in that it includes housing navigation services as well as rapid rehousing assistance to move people quickly into permanent housing. You'll notice when you're applying for one of these programs as well as transitional housing that all interim housing programs this year will be required to eliminate curfews. And this is one way that we are sort of looking at one of our overarching goals to reduce barriers into services and shelters. So that requirement is listed as part of one of the core requirements for interim housing. You'll also see that we are asking whether or not an emergency shelter, a navigation center, or transitional housing program accepts pets. Programs will not be required to accept pets, but programs that allow pets will be given extra points during the review process. We have added a new program category, and that's encampment services. So this includes mobile showers and laundry services, as well as RV waste removal services. And similar to the basic needs category, you don't need to include all 3 types of mobile services. Your proposal can just be for one or all 3 of the examples listed. Housing navigation services must agree to provide those services in alignment with the city's housing navigation standards. These standards are linked to the main community agency RFP page at the very bottom under supplemental information, and they are also linked in the application in CDS under the housing navigation services section. The next set of eligible criteria is homeless prevention. So that's housing retention grants. And again, we are asking for proposals from agencies to help prevent evictions. And this is really designed to support tenants who are at risk of homelessness and wanting to make sure that we are linking them to necessary financial assistance to prevent evictions. There's a street outreach component we really are wanting agencies to focus on engaging and connecting folks who are living on the streets in Berkeley to the coordinated entry system if it's not connected already through the HRC. And the expectation is that street outreach programs will enroll people into mainstream benefits such as CalFresh and GA in the field, or have a strong plan to connect folks living on the streets to those resources. Tenancy sustaining services, these are services that are primarily tied to the city's Shelter Plus Care program and must agree to the city's tenancy sustaining services standards. And similar to the housing navigation standards, these standards are linked to the community agency RFP page and are also linked in the tenancy sustaining services section. Next, I'll turn it over to Brittany to talk about homeless program core requirements.
Thanks, Jennifer. So the Homeless Services Supplemental Application requires agencies to agree to 6 core homeless services requirements. The 6 are listed here. Participate in the North County Coordinated Entry System, provide all services utilizing a housing first approach, agree to attend Alameda County, North County Regional Coordination monthly meetings, and the attendance by the program manager and direct services staff is required. Agree to attend City of Berkeley, North County Operations quarterly meetings, attendance by the associate director or the program manager with program implementation authorities required. Agree to participate in the Homeless Management Information System, HMIS, and enter data within 3 days of program enrollment and exit. And agreed to report on applicable current and future HUD, Alameda County, and City of Berkeley system performance measures, which I'll also reference as SPMs and their targets. So if your agency is awarded funding, you'll be required to report on system performance measures set by HUD, City of Berkeley, and Alameda County. In your application, depending on the specific category of homeless services you choose, you will need to explain how your program will contribute to achieving the performance measure or measures related to that service. So for example, if you choose to apply to the Coordinated Entry System program category, which does include housing problem solving and street outreach, you'll need to explain how your program design will achieve SPMs associated with measures 1, 3, and 7A. If there is no measure that directly pertains to the homeless category you've selected, such as alcohol and other drug and basic needs services, and you wish to describe how your program will contribute to a system performance measure, you can add the service measure and an explanation in a narrative box provided in the application. And my colleague, Mayette, will talk a little bit more about the SPMs in a couple of slides. So the Homeless Services Supplemental section also requires agencies to agree to service category core requirements and answer supplemental questions pertaining to that service category. So I'll use the Coordinated Entry System example again. There are 6 core elements that agencies must agree to and 1 supplemental question in addition to the SPM related questions that I mentioned in the slide before. So these are screenshots of what the Coordinated Entry System supplemental application looks like. There's the 6 core elements, and then there's the supplemental question, which many of the other categories also have the same supplemental question, and then the measures linked to the SPMs within the application. And then there's also several homeless program guiding documents on the community agency RFP webpage and within the application in CDS. Those guiding documents are linked, and you can use them to better guide you in how you should apply to certain service categories. And I will pass it to Mayette.
Thank you, Brittany. So next, we'd like to take a deeper dive into some of the key sections of the RFP application on CDS. So as Brittany stated before, the City of Berkeley aligns its program standards with Alameda County requirements. The RFP application utilizes the county's system performance measurements, or CPMs, to determine the effectiveness of an agency's program in the area they wish to serve. The SPM examines program performance through 3 questions: how much, how well, and with what impact. The first question, how much, is answered in section B4, target population, as shown on the slide here. Here you would describe the primary population your program will serve. Homeless agencies should use program data and HMIS to determine the population they wish to serve and to complete this table. So if we take a look here in the example, we're going to be looking at the 3 columns, FY23, FY24, and FY25. So for FY23, we would use historical data, either from program data or HMIS data, to complete this column. For FY24, we'll use the data that we've collected thus far in order to make projections about how we will end up for the rest of the year. In FY25, we could use projections that we've made for FY24 along with the program targets that are outlined in the system-wide guide, or the system performance guide, in order to determine how many people we would serve. So let's take a look at an example. So here we are going to assume that we are in emergency shelter, and we are filling out the RFP, and we want to talk about what our target population is. So here for FY25, in this example, my emergency shelter has 40 available beds. Based on the county system performance target guides, I know that the requirement is that we would serve 2 times the amount of beds that are available in my shelter. Therefore, I would take the number of beds, which is 40, and multiply that by 2, which gives me the number 80. So you can take a look at the example here and see how we filled out that information. Next slide. So here is a screenshot of our City of Berkeley RFP website. This is where you can find the target guides. So you would go to the City of Berkeley website, and then under additional files, it will populate this list. The bottom list, this is the complete list. On the bottom, you will see it says Homeless Services, Alameda County, City of Berkeley System Targets, how much? So if you click that, it will populate this form here, which tells you how much, and it relates to your different program type. So for example, if you have a street outreach program, you need to know that for every one FTE, they need to serve 125 individuals annually. For my emergency shelter, as we described in the example, my emergency shelter had 40 available beds. I need to serve 2 times the number of beds per year. So that would be 40 times 2, which we got 80. Transitional housing is going to be 1.5 times the number of beds per year. And if I have a housing navigation program or TSS program, then it's 1 FTE to every 20 to 25 individuals. Next slide, please, Brittany. Thank you. Okay. So we're gonna move on to section B7. So section B7 is the service and outcome table. This section examines the quality and effectiveness of your proposed program. On the top of the table, the number of Berkeley/non-Berkeley and Berkeley numbers will be populated from the data that you entered in the target population section. So what you want to do is check this data for accuracy before completing the rest of the table below. So as you can see in the screenshot, for FY25, we projected that we would serve 80 people in our emergency shelter, and that number 80 is shown here in both sections. We were hoping to serve 80 people overall, and we're hoping that all 80 were from the City of Berkeley. So that's correct. So what we'll do is we'll move on from there. But if there is anything in this section that needs to be revised, you want to go back to the target population section and update the number there and make sure that it's populated correctly in the tables above. So the table is broken up into two categories, services and outcomes. Services describes the types of services or activities or opportunities provided by the program participants, provided to the program participants. In our case, our emergency shelter will be providing access to beds for our participants. The units of service captures the quantity of beds provided to the participant, to any participant over a given period. So going back to our example, our shelter has 40 beds. Therefore, we would calculate our units of service by multiplying our 40 beds by 365 days a year, which gives us a total unit of service of 14,600. Outcome captures the impact of services provided on the lives of the individual served. These service measures are automatically populated along with corresponding targets. You see those on the right-hand side under the column that says expected to achieve outcome. In the method for measuring outcomes, this is where you would indicate how you will track your outcomes. A good rule of thumb here is to answer this question by considering who will be doing this work, how often, and what tools will they use. So for example, in the first performance area provided, which is the percentage of participants gained or increased income from start to exit, the dialogue that was provided by our emergency shelter agency is the program manager will run the APR report in HMIS quarterly to evaluate how many participants increased their income from start to exit. The who in this example is the program manager. The report will be ran quarterly. This demonstrates the frequency. And the tool that we will use to measure our impact is the APR report found in HMIS. Next, we'll look at the data description section below. Here, you would provide a description of all service measures and units of service. When possible, include formulas that indicate frequency of service delivery. So let's take a look at some of the examples provided. So for the number of participant sessions, because we're talking about an emergency shelter, then for participant sessions, this would equal the number of beds. So here I provide a brief description. So my agency will provide 24-hour shelter daily to participants that includes 3 meals a day and links to referrals. Very simple, straightforward description. The available shelter beds are 40 times 365 days a year, equaling 14,600 nightly beds for a year. For our data quality entry, I've provided the following description. The intake specialist will meet with the participants upon entry to complete all required documents and will enter participant information into HMIS within 3 days of enrollment. Here we made sure that we told the who, which is the intake specialist. We told the time frame in which they were going to do it, which directly aligned with the Alameda County requirements. And we also talked about the tool we were going to use. So you can refer to this slide for examples of how to detail the information on this services and outcome table. Next slide. So the next section we wanted to talk about is a section that is optional. This is a section that allows you to add supplemental services to your primary program. So in this example, we're still using our emergency shelter. So our emergency shelter would like to also add housing navigation services that would be directly provided for, that would be directly tied to participants within our emergency shelter, and they're also exclusive to those participating in our emergency shelter. So again, this is a service that is a supplement to our primary service, which is emergency shelter. In this case, I only want to add one additional service. And so in the box provided here, I'm going to put a 1. Once I put 1, then it will allow me to, it will populate this drop-down box. And here I will be able to select from a list of additional services. I'm going to choose housing navigation services for this example. Can you click to the next slide, please? Once I click housing navigation, it will populate this additional section that has additional questions that I will answer in order to demonstrate how I will design my supplemental program, housing navigation, to complement my primary program, which is the the emergency shelter. And then next, Brittany will show you all what this looks like live.
Yes, and I'm navigating. I will show my screen in 1 minute. Share. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Can you make it a little bit
Okay.
bigger, Brittany, if possible?
Yep. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to use coordinated entry as an example in the demonstration. Maya just explained the emergency shelter example. So in question B2 is where you would choose your primary service category. So here is where I've chosen coordinated entry system. You would complete these sections like we talked about in the webinar today. And then once you get down to the supplemental section and you want to add additional program categories, this is where you would add the number. So currently our coordinated entry system, our HRC, has 3 additional services included in their program. So you would put in 3, and then it might take a minute, but once 3 is entered, you can choose the additional program categories or service categories. So in this instance, I would choose TSS, rapid rehousing, flexible subsidies, and housing navigation services. Because right now, the coordinated entry system, HRC, it includes housing problem solving, street outreach already, and then the additional 3 services out of the HRC are these 3 listed here. So once you've selected those 3, you click here to update your application. And you'll see coordinated entry system, the supplemental section. You'll see street outreach, then housing navigation has been added. Rapid rehousing, flexible subsidies have been added here. And TSS, tenancy sustaining services, is also added to the supplemental section. You would complete that, save, and continue on with the remaining application. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen again, and we can begin the question and answer portion. And we can do the same, start with hands that are raised, and then work through the Q&A function within the webinar. So I know I went through that pretty fast, but I will start with Emily McPartland.
Hello again. Thanks for answering my question. Go over what you just added, if you add kind of the subcategories or programs in that supplemental, would you then adjust the program outcomes for those kind of like subcategories, or how would you work with that?
Do you want to answer, Jennifer?
Yeah, so once you add the supplemental programs, the main focus of the application just asks you to certify that you agree to the core requirements, and then how those services will contribute to meeting the measures. You should definitely look back at the SPMs that are provided for each of those additional supplementary programs to make sure that you understand what the expectations are, but there won't be another service measure table that gets populated. The idea is that sort of in Mayette's example, where the housing navigation services are tied to the emergency shelter, the idea would be that you would be serving all of the people in the emergency shelter with those housing navigation services. So it would link back to the same participants.
Okay, so if you have separate participants, perhaps do 2 separate applications.
Yes, definitely. So when you're adding a supplementary program, that program needs to specifically be targeted at the primary program.
Okay, good.
They have to be the same population.
Okay, great clarification. Thank you so much.
John?
Hello. 2 questions really. So, I mean, obviously you guys know we operate several programs. And so the idea is that we serve Berkeley residents. And so though with our shelter, we are not the choosers of who stays, right? So our assumption is that 100% will be, but when we're doing our outcomes, where do we find information as to where a person's, what did it used to be called? I don't know, service area, like Mid-County, North County, those things. I mean, I know I can see them in assessments. And I mention this because it's like we have had people that I have looked up that stay at our shelter now that are not North County, but they're still here, but that's not because we chose them. I mean, do we get dinged for that kind of outcomes, being that we're not the ones making that choice as to who stays here?
So the folks that you guys are referred should be included in the North County region. And so I don't think, and Brittany, correct me, unless without a lot of digging, you can see whether or not they were homeless in Berkeley, Albany, or Emeryville. So I think shelters should go ahead and, list the number of people they expect to serve through North County. So it's a little bit different for homeless programs than the other services that the RFP also includes. So you're not dinged for folks that may be referred from out of Berkeley, because you guys are directly getting those referrals from either the HRC or the City of Berkeley.
Okay, and then just one other thing. So with our shelter, the Vets building, we have over the years come to need the shelter manager to help with doing like whatever housing navigation we have, housing applications and all those things. And so is there like a ratio as to how many people of that type you should have to the number of guests? Because we've gone back up to our pre-COVID census of 52, right? So the assumption would be that 52, we'd multiply that by 2, would be serving 104 people. But that's a lot 52 people is a lot for a person to serve. And I was wondering if there was any formula, like you have with the street outreach, you have 1 FTE per 125 people. If there's anything that also indicates how many of that type staff you should have to assist guests with all the things that a shelter monitor wouldn't necessarily be tasked with a service, providing that service.
So the current staff to client ratio is for housing navigation services is one FTE to 20 to 25 participants. So I think the kind of work that you described that the program manager currently does, I think would tie nicely into a housing navigation position. So that's the ratio that I would use.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. That was all I had.
And Leslie?
So when we did this application 4 years ago, we weren't the HRC for families, and we are now. So we would be including that in our city application and not from the county.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I think if you want to be considered for funding to provide CES type services, then you can apply under CES. I think it doesn't necessarily implicate or mean that you would not also be getting funds through the county as an access point.
Woohoo, what a great answer.
But if you want specific funding from the city to conduct those activities, yes, this is the time that you would apply.
Thank you.
Nell Elwin?
Hi. I am with Make It Home, which is a furniture bank. So we partner with social service agencies to fully furnish homes for individuals transitioning out of crisis. So homelessness is certainly the biggest piece of that. I recognize that in the descriptions of the types of services, we would not qualify directly, but wondering if there's a way that we could be added to one of our social service partners' primary programs in one of these categories, if there's any way you see that us being a fit in there. I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, so in some cases, programs will have like a program supply or client services line item in their budget. And in some cases, that can be used for move-in costs into permanent housing. Sometimes it's used for furniture. So I would say, like, if you were to connect with an agency that is moving people into permanent housing, that they could potentially include you as a budget line item.
Okay, that makes lots of sense, but we would have to be added by them is what has become clear to me. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help.
And Leslie, I see your hand raised again. It might have been from the previous question. Not, yeah, Mike Thomas. Oops, sorry, you should be able to unmute.
Hello?
Yes,
Hi.
can hear you.
Hi, Mike Thomas from Options Recovery Services. So on the treatment, on the drug treatment proposal, and so can we mix, like, if I wanted to propose an RFP for like a drug program and like a SUD navigation, the homeless service outreach type thing, that would be unique to what we already do, is that possible? And would that be on the treatment, would that be specific to referrals from the city, or would that be based on the outreach that we do? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Mike. Let me try to answer that and let me know if I need to clarify further. So in the past, for all of our homeless services slots, we have required either a referral from the Housing Resource Center or from the City of Berkeley. And so I think we would want to continue with that practice. So if you have AOD, slots for like a daytime program, we would want to make sure that we were closely coordinating those slots with these referral partners.
Right.
So that's kind of the daytime treatment or AOD treatment program. And then it sounded like the second part of your question was related to a SUD specific outreach team. Is that
right? It would, yeah. I mean, so it would be, it could be. So if it's based on city referrals, I would probably propose like a standalone program that would, because I'd want to have to lower the barriers, right? There are typical, we've had barriers in the past that it wouldn't necessarily fit for our absent based program, but I'm not necessarily, I kind of feel like it would be a good opportunity maybe to propose to do a new modality for options, maybe on a harm reduction level that would fit with the city referrals, with people that we wouldn't serve previously that we would be able to serve now. In the past, I think if somebody wasn't ready to quit, then they couldn't come based on some of those referrals, right? But I think maybe we could create another modality in here someplace that would provide treatment and services to folks wherever they're at, as the need requires. So that I'm just kind of thinking through what I want to propose, and I just want to make sure it's possible. So yeah, I think you answered my question.
great? I see that it's 3:00 and I see that we have some questions in the chat. And so just wanted to let everybody know that those questions will be captured in our Q&A document that will be linked to the city's webpage no later than next Wednesday, November 22nd. And so again, just want to appreciate everybody's time today. And the good questions, and we're looking forward to seeing your program proposals.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.